Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 310. We're recording this episode live November 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Nick Roome, joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby,
Hello there.
the Human Factors guy, as you can see. I need to change it. Can we change that? We need to change that back. We got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the seven new jobs that are coming with the advent of AI. I think that was a very clumsy way to introduce that. But we're going to be talking about seven new roles because of AI. We always talk about jobs taking AI taking people's jobs, but this is kind of the flip side. I really have nothing else. Barry, what's going on over at 1202?
Not a huge amount, really. Basically, as we've mentioned before, we're taking a break for 2025, so we're looking forward to January 26th, and we've started curating guests. So I have a few lined up already. So we're gonna have to start. We're in two minds about whether we start recording some in December, but we want to get going in January. But in the wider ergonomics field, and I think I mentioned last time, we're looking forward to 2027 because we'll just ignore 2026 completely because the IEA triennial is coming to London. So that should be a really cool event. Already seen a lot of the planning happening for it, and we know tickets are going to be going out, starting to go on sale fairly soon. So it'll be a really cool opportunity for anybody who wants to get involved in HFE stuff and wants to come to London and perhaps meet up and do stuff. Then we can start like making dates already. It'd be great.
That would be awesome. I hope to make it out there for that. That would be super cool. Okay, well let's not bury the lead. Let I think we should just get right into it. What do you say?
Let's crack on.
I wouldn't say that's a new record, but that was pretty quick. Barry, what's the news story for this week?
So the story this week is about the real AI crisis isn't job loss, it's governance. We're running out high risk, opaque systems without the human expertise needed to question, monitor, and be accountable for them. So, using the metaphor of a cake baked with salt instead of sugar, the author of tonight's story warns that you can't retrofit transparency, traceability, or human oversight after deployment, especially under regimes like the EU AI Act, and in a world where just 250 poisoned files can quickly compromise massive language models. They lay out seven emerging custodian roles, like AI decision auditors, human accountability architects, and AI risk stewards, that sit squarely in the human factors wheelhouse. People who understand socio-technical systems that can challenge AI reasoning and design processes that preserve human responsibility. For human factors practitioners, this is basically a call to step into the cockpit of AI, to build the skills in governance, scenario thinking, and data provenance so that when machine generates outputs, humans still own the outcomes. Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I have plenty of thoughts, but before I do that, you mentioned a couple of the roles. I'm going to bring up this graphic. Oh my god, we got this set up in the pre-show and then it just messed up entirely. All right, so we're going to bring up this graphic here to actually go through the roles here before we start. So let's talk about these seven different positions and talk about what the author says they are, and then I'll give my thoughts. All right,
Cool.
so the first one that we have is the AI decision auditor. So this is somebody who questions and validates the AI before implementation. Um, I'm just going to read the baseline stuff. I think there's a lot here. The human accountability architect is number two here, and they design processes that preserve human responsibility even as systems become more autonomous. That you have the multimodal interaction designer who is orchestrating how multiple AI agents collaborate with human oversight. You have the AI risk steward that monitors systems for drift, degradation, and bias emergence. You have the responsible AI implementation strategist, translates between the technical teams who build and legal teams who interpret, ensuring compliance is not theater but embedded practice. You have number 6 here, the AI drift and integrity analyst. They track models' performance over time, identifying when systems produce unreliable results for before regulatory audits discover the problem. And then the seventh position here is the transparency and explainability designer. So they translate the AI decision making into understandable explanations. Um, okay, my thoughts. Uh, One, this is coming from a position of all right. The seven seems unrealistic. I'm just going to say that right out the gate here. I think that a lot of these hats are hats that folks like you and I probably already wear,
Hmm. Agree.
especially when it comes to designing the process to preserve human responsibility, to collaborate with human oversight, to uh, do some of the um, risk analysis. I think we already sort of embody some of these roles. I disagree strongly with some of these positions. Like take position 1 for example. Um I don't ever see a world in which we have a dedicated role to somebody who is questioning and validating AI before implementation. That would be rolled into one of these other roles. I think we already do we already do some of this in some of the roles, and I don't see, unless you are a company with a lot of resources, a lot of money, that really wants to create these roles that are dedicated for these things. I just don't see it happening in like small businesses. I don't
Yeah.
see it happening in medium-sized businesses even. These are hats that we wear. These are not jobs that are being created. I would go as far to say I don't think most of these will actually see the light of day as uh as like something you would see on LinkedIn as like we're hiring for the AI risk steward, right? I don't see that. I see that as something that is part of a larger role, and these are hats that you wear within those roles.
Yeah.
Um, that's my very cynical, very critical lens on this. Barry, what are your thoughts on this?
So I guess with I mean, we've already up to what now the fifth industrial revolution, and one of the big things around that is jobs go. You know, as things happen, jobs disappear, but then other more jobs are created. So fundamentally, I think this idea that we're going to see new or different types of roles and within because of AI, because of autonomy and automation, then yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think new jobs are going to be created, or probably better still, rather than new roles, I think it's more new functions, very much aligned to what you were just saying. I think there's a lot of these things that are here that, yes, they're new things to be done, they're new tasks, they're new functions, but whether they just they exist in their own right or they're just subsumed into other bits. And I've got some thoughts on them roles that I'll come on to at the end. But I've been talking about AI and HF, particularly in the past, I would say 6 months. A lot of people have asked for presentations and things on the use of AI in the human factors role and about how we using it. So this is almost really topical. It's a really good thing around in bringing on more comment and more discussion because we need it. We need to really understand what we as HR practitioners do in this role, and it's not just good enough to say that with a traditional HF education, you can come and just go and straight do all of this. We need to include, I think, AI and autonomy into the sweat boundaries of an HF practitioner. It shouldn't. It's getting to the point where it cannot be a specialism anymore. It's got to be a it's got to be part and parcel of what we do in the same way anthropometry is, in the same way cognitive understanding is. So we need to bring all of that into there. But as we see some of these roles, I mean, large language models, we're now seeing like prompt engineering is a discipline which didn't exist, what, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Whereas now we're getting a lot more drive and guidance around prompt engineering. So we are generating these new roles. Um, for me, one of the big things in all of this is around how we test AI. We've and this is certainly something that, again, I don't think it's a new role, but it's certainly a new function. So how do we make sure that the output is what we expect it to be? Because AI has given us a whole new view now on out. Because with automation, if you give a system a defined set of inputs, it would always give you the same output. We're not going to get that with AI. We're going to have a variety of output that is still right, and so that's going to change how we do systems engineering. Um, but I guess I sort of had a bit of a doodle with them 7 roles to work out what are my role, what where do I think they fit. So you mentioned the AI decision auditor. Well, isn't that just the assurance role? So human factors integration is all about assurance, and it kind of just fits into that really well. And I would then also link that to that number 6, which was the AI drift and integrity analyst. Well, again, that's just assurance. So I think them 2 things are still a part of a role we already have. The human accountability architect. Now, again, that's ethics. So fundamentally, it's part. You could say it's part of the integration role. I could see a separate function of ethical architect, because it's something we haven't really had to deal with up to now. We've always sort of said about that human in the loop piece, should always be there, and that's policy. That policy is getting more and more challenged as technology moves on. So I could see a potential new role, not just for AI, but in the wider space around ethical architectures. Um, and so that also brings in responsible AI implementation. Um, Things like multimodal interaction designers, transparency and explainability, that's just UI design, that's just HCI design, I think. And AI risk is just risk engineering. So out of all of them, I see maybe one new role, but I don't think it's probably a new role. I think there's something probably very aligned to that already that will probably take that in. But certainly new functions that will form big parts of roles. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting times.
You made a point about how jobs come and go, and this is if if there's not a better example of why this is such a revolutionary time for the way that we think about work. You brought up the example of prompt engineer. That's on its way out already
Mm, yeah,
because the models are now accommodating for the fact that not everybody is a prompt engineer. And you can still do prompt engineering, but the models are getting better and better at understanding user intent because they you know 5.1, right? Chat. This is a snapshot in time, by the way. If you're
mhm,
watching this like 3 years in the future, I am so curious how things have changed since uh, uh, November 28th, 2025. Um, I think there's with prompt engineering right now the models are pushing back and saying, well, did you actually mean this or that? So I don't know if you've gone on to like ChatGPT 5.1 lately, right?
yeah,
That's the current model that we're on. If you ask it something, it will actually come back and ask for clarity. It will do deeper thinking to actually reason out what it is that the user is trying to do. And so those models are actually becoming better about understanding user intent. And so even that role that you said, prompt engineer, that's coming and going already,
yeah,
and AI has been mainstream for a couple years now at this point. And so it's like I'm wondering how much of these problems will go away in the next few years as we start to think about these. I don't think ethics will ever go away. I think ethics is always going to be a discussion, especially around who's responsible for a decision making thing when there are suggestions by some of these AI these AI models. And when we talk about AI, we're not just talking about LLMs. Those are the quickest ones to point to. But I think keep in mind that there are other AI models that specialize in things that are not LLMs, right? So let's take the example of being able to detect cancer in imaging, right?
yeah,
There are specific models that will look at imaging to detect whether or not cancer is present. There's always, a doctor review to make sure that it's there, but this will flag things that maybe were not previously seen. it'll hopefully not flag too many false positives. But that is another type of model that we could apply these things to, and I think that's important to remind ourselves of, to ground ourselves. We're not just talking about LLMs here. I think
Abs-
you're yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely right. I mean, when you look at the full breadth and depth of what AI is, you've got things like neural networks, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of other different examples of where this comes in. And but to get this right now, I think the is quite key because we're gonna be having artificial artificial general intelligence coming around. We're not there yet. We've done interviews before, discussions before, where we mentioned the work by Professor Paul Salmon and them sort of people, where they look at this and what the risk of AGIs could be. But if we get these sort of not necessarily roles, but the SQUEP functions, so where we need to be suitably qualified and experienced in AI within the HF roles, we need to start thinking about this now in order to make this just business as usual. So I think you're right. Ethics is always going to be there. Assurance is always going to be there. We're always going to have to do some sort of systems assurance of how we do that. We're always going to have designers, but the UI design or the HCI design elements of this, we are already talking now about the making users of these systems have better situational awareness, situational understanding, which has always been an HF problem. When you're looking at any sort of interface, any sort of display, any sort of um, output where decisions have been made that are not immediately obvious, that you've got to be able to dig into these type of things and make sure they're available. I mean, one of the interesting problems I was having a chat about the other day is what happens when not at the moment when we're still questioning everything that AI does, but in about, I don't know, 5 or 10 years' time, when we're using some of these tools and we don't interrogate where the knowledge comes from, we don't think that the knowledge base could have been poisoned or compromised in any way, and we just take for granted. In the same way as we now use, mapping and sort of like Google Maps and them sort of things, we used to, when you put in the destination about where you want to go to, it would show up your route, and you would query or look, right, why is it sending me along that route? Why is it doing this? Why is it doing that? We don't do that anymore. You just put in your destination, you press go, and you start following your turn by turn directions. Very few people now question why I'm going by a certain route. When it's now shown, given to you by your mapping software, if we're not careful, we're going to be there in the same place with AI, because people who um, really, I guess, trust what the machine is poking out at you, is absolutely right. And the analogy is there with aircrew, with pilots. The the amount of I would say probably both civilian and military, there was a huge drive on, as you get more and more information within the cockpit, that pilots would be looking heads down at the systems rather than looking heads out at the airspace around them, and so more and more accidents are happening because they were heads down, sucking in the data, not actually looking at out at where they were going. So, so that more and more was being done to make sure that pilots could be heads out, and we're seeing that in vehicles as well. We're going to be in the same place with AI and autonomy. That if we're not careful, we people will rely too much on it without questioning what they're actually seeing.
Yeah, I want to go back to your exercise of sort of thinking about these roles in their own lanes, because I think you have it pretty close here, right? That there's you essentially have four, so three, four, one, two,
For
three, four. You have four different roles here. So you've combined the seven down into four, um, and to think about, from a human factors perspective, what is it that our role will be over time, right? I think that we have we have is this a pottery term? We have fingers in all these pots. Is that a pottery term?
I think your fingers in all the pies.
Pies.
Bake
Oh,
baking term.
okay. All right, baking. We have fingers in all these pies. Like, let's think about you used to pottery on my mind now. Let's see. So, thinking about what we would actually do, right? Let's think about the AI decision auditor, and I think about this in two ways, right? I think about um, the way that the author has described this as they're questioning and validating the AI before implementing. But I also wonder if there's uh some auditing that goes on after post post AI decision, right? Um they cite here human oversight for high risk systems, but human oversight without the expertise to question is theater, not governance. And so I think, from a decision making perspective, we will need to provide better messaging when we, give those outputs.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of human accountability architect, this is an interesting one. I don't know if we necessarily have that much sway here, but it is an interesting question of like who's responsible for a bad decision.
Mhm.
And that's a direct result of number one, right? You have a decision auditor who's looking at the decision that maybe an AI made, or maybe the decisions of implementing that AI. Are they at fault because they're the ones who recommended the program? Is the person who made the decision at fault because they are the one that ended up, you know, making the call? They were the human in the loop. So the accountability architect, I think we need to really, really be careful with this role and say humans. Um, it's difficult to talk about because if the human doesn't have all the information, are they really at fault? Like, this is a huge ethical one here.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because this leans very heavily into systems and systems engineering.
Hmm.
So it's that whole SOSA piece. And if you took out the term AI and you have multiple systems working together, and where does the human responsibility sit within them? So that we'd have a if you got multiple systems, you'd work out, or you should work out as part of your HFI or HSI type work. You should be able to work out who has responsibility where, and to make sure that the human in the loop decision making is happening with each individual system, and then create almost a hierarchy or a throughput of that for your SOSA system. And so, really, all we're saying here is with this is that some of them systems are AI. And so, technically, the thing already exists, which really sort of kills my argument for the separate ethical architect. Um, really, this is having, delving into this a bit deeper. Is this just the systems engineering role? Or is there a systems engineering ethical element of that? I think there is. I still think that in today's systems, given where we're going, I think there is a role for an ethical architect or an adjudicator or something of that role, which could wrap into your HFI HSI manager role. I think it's possibly a bit specialist because there is a leaning there to there's a legal, a humanitarian bit as well, which really doesn't naturally fall into our training. But this whole, I think my almost go-to test for a lot of this, especially when you're doing, say, task allocation, task analysis, and things like that, is what happens when you take the term AI out of it, out of any sort of phrasing. Take the term AI out of it. What does it sound like? And in this case, for me, this is just SOZA, and how that runs.
Yeah, I'm gonna move down the list here to the next one too. I think you're right, Barry. But along with those multiple systems, here's once again more systems. You have AI agents
Yeah.
collaborating, and then you have the human working alongside those agents, or overseeing those agents. And again, I see that as just how does the human integrate with the system? You have the AI risk steward who is looking for drift, degradation, bias emergence. This is an evaluation role. This is somebody who's evaluating the performance of a tool, and how you set up those metrics. That will be on the person. But now this is done by folks like cyber, right?
Yep.
This is somebody who's in cybersecurity looking at, what type of information does it have access to? Is it providing the right, sorry, cyber or IT? They're looking at whether or not this is an appropriate model. I think there's likely some human factors going on with there too, like picking the right model for the tool, uh, that or for picking the right tool for the task that's at hand. I think when you look at things like the responsible AI implementation strategist, I think you got it right there. It's what you call it is the ethical architect, but I think also it's the systems
Yep.
engineering here. Um, Drift integrity analysis or analyst. Uh, Once again, this is measuring performance. This is performance evaluation of a model and seeing if there needs to be an upgrade to the model or change in the model. And then the last one here, understanding explanations, the AI decision making into understandable explanations. That's human factors. That's core human factors. Now, I will say, I feel like I've been quite critical of this author so far, and I want to let up just a little bit because I think their main message isn't necessarily these are the 7 jobs that are coming. I think the main argument that the author is trying to make here is that, hey, we should be paying attention to these. And they use the analogy of salt in the cake.
Mhm.
And what does that analogy mean? That analogy means that once you bake a cake with salt, you can't undo that. You have to start over with your cake. And so I think what this author is recommending is that we start to think about these things early and often when incorporating AI into our workflows, into our jobs, into the way that we conduct business. And I think that is a very good argument for human factors. And so I'd
Yep.
like to thank this author for doing that. We disagree on the roles here, or on the jobs that would be created, but I think ultimately we agree on the concept that this stuff needs to be considered as we start to move forward with this stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to. They're right. Like if you don't bake in this stuff early, it's you can't unfix it easily. I would say it's not quite the same as baking a cake with salt because some of these I think could be applied post hoc, but there are some things that need to be applied as you're thinking about the process as a whole.
Yep. I would one another good thing that they bring out, I don't know if you can bring up the graphic again, but scroll all the way down to the second graphic that's there, is where they talk about AI governance and some of the skills that that's the one that are there. Because actually, I think this is I mean, this is good systems engineering again. But again, it is stuff that do need to be thinking about. So it's accountability, it's legal versus moral. So that goes into the ethical side of things. Systems thinking and adversarial thinking. This is something I talked about in twice in the past 2 weeks. Around good systems engineering gets you thinking about outside agents. And what we always forget is there's adversarial agents, there's threat actors, and more so now with AI, because there's more places to be able to do that sort of thing. So we do need to bring that back into systems engineering, um, provenance and challenging what's going on. So again, what I really like about what the author has done here is really facilitated this discussion. And in reality, we I think I said right at the beginning, we as HF practitioners should really be looking at this and saying, right, what does this mean to us? How is our job changing? And what are the skills that we need as part of our basic bread and butter? What do we need in our standard toolbox to be managing and doing HF in an AI world? Because we can't ignore it. It's here. In fact, it was here yesterday. It's going to be here tomorrow. And we are the ideal people to be doing this if we take that challenge.
Yeah, there's so much more that I want to talk about with this, and hopefully we can fit it into the next 10 minutes or so, so we have some time at the end. If we go a little longer, that's okay. But the some of the things that I want to talk about here are really, well, one, what are the jobs that are missing from this? And I don't know if there's any that are obvious to you, but something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is the way in which, uh, for the better or for worse, our jobs will change because of how systems need to be designed not only for humans, but they need to be designed for agents and models as well, right? For these models to do something well, they need access to the data that a human is requesting, and ultimately the models and how they perform behind the scenes are going to have impacts on the human performance at the other end of those results. And so for me, one thing that I think is not necessarily here is a designer that is solely focused on how an agent or a model might interact with data. And I don't know if that's necessarily our role as human factors practitioners. I would argue that it is strongly not our role. But we we would definitely have some say into it, because the way in which that model or agent accesses that information and then relays that information to the human at the other end of it is really important, and we want to make sure we get that right. I think that is more sort of the systems engineering approach as well, but it's something that I don't see mentioned here that is being thought of. Are there any roles that you see or that you've been thinking about that are not necessarily represented here?
I was playing around with the idea of agent managers. So if we have a good AI agent for a particular role, um, how do we manage that in such a way that is reusable, safe, and so going back into that threat actor type scenario as well. So how? And I don't think it's an HF role, but I think it is a role. So how do we look after an agent that AI agent that's out there either in the wild or however we deal with that? Um, I also slightly playing with it a bit. Um, what about historians? How do we? Because every time we play with the AI and regenerate agents and regenerate things, or the ability to regenerate things on the fly, how do we keep the historical record of what's gone before? And so we make sure that we are learning from experience and not trying to build new every time. Um, and I've sort of called it historian in this to sort of make think about the historian in the wider sense about the people who note down what's happened in history, um, to try and bring that forward. I just think there's something there about, yes, being able to go a bit like we use, say, LLMs at the moment, rather than go back and look at maybe previous chats to do something, which you've done before. You'll probably just chuck it into a new prompt and say, do it again, rather than scrolling through your history because you don't know whether it's there. Um, we almost need something to be able to easily check when somebody says, "Oh, I need something to do this." Oh, we've done that before. You can reuse that and work forward. So there is an element of that. Um, and then there's the how do we, if we again have this approach with AI that it can regenerate, it can learn it and go over time. How do we identify best practice? What becomes best practice with AI, and is that how we generate it, or how do we know what is best practice within the AI itself? And I don't know quite what I mean by that, if I'm brutally honest. But I just know that there is an element of wider learning that's not just learning within of itself. So yeah, that's sort of what I've been playing with.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think, beyond the roles themselves, I think there's, I always like to link it to how are we as a society and how is culture sort of responding to this. I think there's likely going to be, um what's the best way to put this? Like a shift in trust.
Yep.
I think there's already a large subset of people that will take what AI says at face value. And I think this is important for us as human factors practitioners to come in and say, you can't just trust everything. We got to do some training. We have to, um, you know, basically provide them with um, scenarios where potentially you're showing them how it could get something very wrong. And I wonder if, when you sit down and watch like the HR training videos, I wonder if there's going to be training videos on AI. There might already be some, but
Yeah.
to really drill it into corporate, that this you can't take what AI says at face value yet. It will get better, but it's not there now. And so I wonder if we're going to be shifted towards a society that trusts less, which I think is dangerous in a lot of ways, but let's not get too much into that. I think there's also just generally, um, from my perspective, I see a societal trend towards negative uh, attitudes or feelings towards AI.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of this trend, I will say, is sparked by some of the creative tools that AI is focused on right now: the image generation, the video generation, the creative writing, right? Those types of things, I think people look at and go, ah, so art is dead. I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I can see the concern when somebody can whip up a video in half the time that it used to take, because now they're just spending their time on prompts and figuring out the right lighting and all that stuff in a prompt versus actually getting all the resources to make that shot. Um, I wonder if we will see that narrative change once AI will, the narrative right now is AI will take your job, and I that is so beyond what is actually happening. It's I think we've said this on the show before. It's like AI is not going to take jobs as much as it will change your job. Um, and I wonder if there will be a shift, a cultural shift, once AI reaches the worker class. Are there going to be AI built um, into retail systems where when when you're at the register and somebody has purchased, you know, a number of things, and then there's an LLM on the cashier's thing that says, "Would you like to also get this that is tailored towards that person's interests based on what they just bought?" And then they have to recommend it to them. Like, there's going to be and please, corporations, do not take that idea. That's terrible. Do not. Um, but I am wondering, will the narrative change from AI is taking jobs to AI is changing what jobs are?
I think there's definitely something to that because again, all the way through history, as technology itself evolves, jobs change. Um, and some jobs do go away. So take coal mining as I live in Wales. Coal mining was a massive industry here. But as you then got into more and more, machines getting more and more involved in that type of thing, then less and less workers are required because it's dangerous work. So send a machine in, and it's also more efficient. It can work 24 hours, all that sort of stuff. So I think with some of the tools you highlighted, so taking more of the creative jobs, I think there's definitely a concern there. However, is it realistic? Because some of the stuff that we use AI for now, so in image generation, so we're saying we're taking it away from artists. You got to ask yourself the question: would I have done that in the first place? So I'm using some image generation as part of maybe some PowerPoint presentation I'm doing. Would I have gone to an external artist, or would I have just bodged together a simpler diagram? Chances are I would have bodged together a simpler diagram,
Or
and
not
also
bothered to do it in the first place?
or just not done it. And also historically, so you would have gone out to a person, before PowerPoint existed, you'd have gone out to somebody to create your 35 mil slides to put through a projector. Um, and what we had then was you just had less presentations. A presentation was a really posh thing to have. Whereas now everybody creates a presentation at the drop of a hat. It's really easy. And so AI is going to facilitate us doing new and better things and do things quickly and things like that. But it's still just going to be a tool. It's not going to sort of take over the world. So we're going to find out new ways of working, what we can do, what we can do with it, and that type of thing going forward. It's not, and this is why it's going to be a revolution. And I think more so a revolution than an evolution, because we're going to find new things that we didn't know we could do, in the way that we can do it. The point you made earlier around prompt engineering already disappearing. I mean, you actually made the point really beautifully in the last show when you were creating the image, that small bit of video using Sora 2. You went into ChatGPT first to tell it to create the prompt for you to more optimistically optimally put it into Sora 2. And so you're using one tool to generate the perfect prompt to go into the other tool because the other tool was more immature. And so we've seen the same with coding. Coding of itself, more people now have access to I get complex coding because you can ask ChatGPT to do it for you, or you can ask the Microsoft 365 version of ChatGPT to do it for you, to put functions together and to put wider examples together. So it is about how does the job change rather than replacing completely. But some of them jobs might get changed very radically.
Yeah. All right. I think we should probably move on. Barry, final thoughts on these 7 new roles for AI.
I think we've quite conclusively said that these roles in as of themselves may not be the ones, but definitely from a human factors perspective, we need to learn these functions, we need to learn these tasks, and they need to become part of our bread and butter day to day way that we work as HR practitioners.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that assessment. I think some are missing, but this is a good start. And I don't think they're all roles. I think they're hats that we wear. And like you said, we need to incorporate those into our day to day. And companies and businesses need to incorporate those into their planning and strategy. Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back after this for some it came from. See what's going on in the human factors community. Oh, and thank you to our friends over at UX Collective for our news story this week. If you want to follow along, we do post the links to all the original articles in our Discord, where you can join us for more discussion on these stories and much more. We'll be right back. Yes, as always, huge thank you to all of our patrons. You truly keep the lights on over here, and you keep the show going in the background. We use our Patreon funds to pay for a lot of the overhead that is required to host, to broadcast, to do all the things that a podcast might do. So thank you so much. This show is truly supported by listeners like you. We don't have any sponsors at this time, and so really it's funded by a small group of people that support us on Patreon. If you'd like to, patreon.com/humanfactorscast. We'd appreciate your patronage. All right. It's been a while since we've done this, Barry, but let's go ahead and get into It Came From. Every time. That's embarrassing. I feel like with AI, I should probably make something better.
I like that. I think
Do you?
it's short,
It's
sharp, to the point.
it's so basic. All right.
It's like a pair of slippers.
Okay. Look, we didn't get to It Came From last time because we were talking about all the news that we had missed over the last year. Well, good news for you. We also missed a lot of It Came Froms over the last year. So we might be pulling from stuff for quite some time for It Came From. But this week, we have a couple of interesting ones, and a new one from ResearchGate, which is interesting. So let's tackle the one from ResearchGate first. The main question here, this is from Gasson, and the main question here is, how can generative AI reshape creative literacy and redefine the role of design educators in fostering truly augmented creativity? And I thought this was a great one to complement our story tonight.
Mhm.
There's more to this, but the two main questions: how can design teachers foster transliteracy and critical use of AI as a creative partner rather than a substitute? And what new forms of co authorships our pedagogical roles emerge in this age of intelligent co-creation? Barry, what do you think?
It's a really cool question because I don't think it's restricted to design creation either. It is it. How do we engage and use generative AI throughout industry? But fundamentally, I've seen rather depressingly, I've seen a lot of education or a lot of educators complaining about the use of AI and saying, as soon as they see any of their students using AI, that they will stop doing it and things like that. Whereas I've seen some more, I would say, more enlightened ones saying we need to show them how to use it, show them how to use it responsibly, how to engage with it. So you then get into the heart of this. How do we look about how we teach, use and teach design? Bring in how do we use the tool? Firstly, we've got to teach the teachers what can it do, how can it do, what are the pros, what are the strengths. So we're not using chat gpt to do calculators and things like that. So how do we make that work? But then also then because then they can work with the students to say, look, use these tools, you use it together. I think the co-authorship idea, my jury's still out on this. So I've seen a few papers, I've seen different things sort of saying, Bill wrote the authors were Bill, Bob, and ChatGPT, and I don't know whether I think that ChatGPT has done enough to be an author of it, given that it's not actually doing any thinking of its own right. It's just sorting out information for you. Because why aren't you also then crediting Microsoft Word, which did all the typesetting for you? Why aren't you attributing Microsoft in its entirety, or Apple because you use their platform to write it on? And so I might be being slightly facetious. So I think this intelligent co-creation isn't necessarily a thing. I think it's still just a tool. I think later on down the line, when we get to AGI type stuff, we might be in a different place. But at the moment, I think it is still a tool. Let's use it as a tool. Let's teach people how to use the tool properly, and use it to encourage people to be more creative and to have a better creative output. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree that there are likely going to be shifts in dynamics in how we use these tools for things. Right, I've already found myself using a lot of this tool for show prep. Right, it's not necessarily that I don't have my own thoughts. I do. I use them as prompts to say, how can I think about this in different ways? And I often have it challenge not only the viewpoint of the articles, but the viewpoint of myself, right? What are some things that I myself might not consider? And I do that as a way to bring more voices to the table. And so the way it will change is that we will use them as tools to augment and offset our current things. And I think the interesting way in which we'll use them, I think you were kind of getting at this, is that the margins by where we will use them changes. You might not want to make a fancy graphic for a PowerPoint presentation, but that might be something that AI generates, with just the input of the slide. And so, boom, it's there. And does this make for more engaging content over time? Maybe. But it's there and it wasn't there before. And so I think we're seeing these emerging trends of, well, now we're actually finding gaps in the things that we would normally not do, or the things that we're, traditionally didn't have time for, but maybe wanted to do, that are now becoming easier and easier when we can offset it to an AI tool. Now, in terms of education, and I think this is a big conversation in this space, I'm going to point y'all to Nate B. Jones. He has a Substack and he's a great follow if you like anything AI. He's on TikTok, he's on YouTube. He's a great AI leader when it comes to thinking about how we interact with AI. I can't recommend him enough. But he has a most recent article about how to talk about AI at Thanksgiving, and I think there's one thing specifically that he brings up about cheating and education and using them as tools in the classroom. He brings up some specific numbers here. This is not imagined. 43% of college students have used AI tools, 89% of them using them for homework. UK universities caught nearly 7,000 students cheating with AI in the years 23 to 24, which is triple the prior year. In one test, University of Reading, 94% of AI written submissions went undetected. Um, but here's some important context, right? Stanford runs a long-running research on academic dishonesty. There's 60 to 70% of high school students reporting cheating in some form before ChatGPT. So the tools are changing, but the behavior doesn't. And I think acknowledging that these tools are real, they brings up the whole calculator argument. It doesn't necessarily teach or doesn't necessarily change how what they taught, but how they teach it. And so I think we're probably going to see something similar here. We're still on the early end of this. It's only been a couple of years. We have
Yeah.
to, we have to adapt, and we will. But I thought those were interesting points. Again, Nate B. Jones, he's a great guy to follow. But I echo those. I think when we teach about these roles, we have to be. It has to be baked into our education as well, right? The way that we talk and speak about AI, as with the advent of the calendar, with advent of word processor, with advent of whatever tool, we're now learning those in the classroom, and we have to. All right. Any final thoughts?
I think that just one more. I think the perhaps we also need to rethink how we look at education. Education at the moment is so baked around having some input and regurgitating it out onto paper, digital paper or otherwise. Um, if the problem is now that LLMs are making that easier to access for that type of cheating, shall we say? I think it's actually using the right tools for the right job. Maybe educators are being lazy and need to think about different ways of proving or allowing students to prove that they've understood the lesson and the assignment. So do better.
Do better. All right. We had two more, but I think we'll skip those and put them in for next time because we're kind of at the tail end of here of the show here. But I'm glad we're getting back to this "it came from" thing. This was a really great question and one that I thought went really well with tonight's discussion.
Yes.
All right. Now time for a segment that requires no introduction. It's one more thing. Just talk about one more thing. Barry, what you got?
I'm probably going to repeat the same theme of my one more things forevermore. So we're back to pottery again, as I mentioned last week. That I'm really big into this. Tomorrow is my first ever sale. That over the past 6 months, I've accrued so much pottery that I've made that, quite frankly, people are getting quite sick of it. It's stacked up in places and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm but there's a charitable Christmas fair going on. I got asked if I would consider selling my stuff there, and so I am. And I thought it'd be dead easy because you just chuck it out there, chuck some prices on it. But I've suddenly realised it's going to be a first time in a completely different field that I'm just going to have pure judgment because people are either going to buy it or they're not, or they're going to be quite easy to turn around and say, "Well, that's not very good," or "It's very heavy," or "It's very blah 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 blah." Um, and there's going to be a hard measure at the end of it. Am I going to sell anything? Because if I come back, I've stacked up and priced today all the bits I've got. If I come back with all the bits that I've gone down with and I don't sell a thing, I'm going to be quite sad. So tomorrow evening could be quite a sad time for me. We'll see
So
how it goes.
is this event, is this just for pottery selling, or is this for a multitude of different types of items?
It's a multitude of different types of items. So it's put on by our local scout group, and they are, there's lots of different people. I think so it's an artisan fair really. So there's going to be lots of different types of things there. I'm probably going to be the only pottery person there, I think. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Well, that's great because one, they have no point of comparison, and two, they're not professional judges, so I think you're likely to get some sort of leeway there. That
I've I've also priced it really cheap, so it's easy Christmas presents.
easy,
Yes,
easy. Well, if you're in the neighborhood, go buy Barry's pottery.
please, because I need shelf room. Nick, what about you? What's your one more thing?
I've been playing around. Okay, the theme today is AI, right? So I've been playing around with this idea of are you familiar with Claude skills?
No, I'm not.
So
So
the way that Claude skills work is you basically bake in instructions for an AI, right? So this would be like a prompt. You give it that prompt, and then you could basically give Claude a prompt that says, "Hey," and use this skill to do it. Um, and then it will go to that skill and pull that prompt and perform that prompt. And
okay.
you can chain things together. Like I will give you context for this, but and the use case that I'm trying to do, right? So the way that I've been doing this is that I've been building a custom GPT and I've been uploading it with text documents of prompts. And for an example here, in the preparation of show notes, right? You can probably tell we massage the blurb after it comes back, but we have a blurb that comes back in our typical voice. We fed it a bunch of information and had it come back. So that way it comes back in our style. I also have a way to generate titles based on our previous titles. And I also have a thing that will generate some talking points, right? And these are all different prompts. I've also created one to look up a royalty-free image that is on Pexels, right? That is representative of the thing. So these are all different prompts, and these are all in the assistance of creating show notes. Um, Now, what I've done is I put them all into a GPT, and what I can do is feed the article that we're talking about in once, and it'll come
Mhm.
back with everything. So I can
Cool.
say, give me a title, and it'll go through, read the title script, and then it'll give me three options for the titles depending on what the content is, and then it'll go through and then it'll write a blurb for it, and then it'll go through and it'll do the analysis, and then it'll go through and then do the Pexels one, and they're all different prompts. Whereas before, if you wanted to put them all in like a mega prompt, that would be something insane. But now it's calling the reference. It's kind of like ARG, which I'm gonna get the augmented retrieval something retrieval generation, augmented retrieval generation. But basically it's calling these prompts and pulling them in, doing the thing, dumping it out, pulling the next in, doing the thing, dumping it out, and then putting it all into one input. And it's really cool. It's very cool if you have like a lot of things that you use one input for. So if you have like, I don't know, a picture that you want to dissect in different ways, and
Mhm.
you have like, oh, show me the emotional meaning of this picture, and then show me the physical components of this, but describe this picture. You could have those as different prompts and then dump them into a GPT and then have it do its own thing. Now there are some drawbacks to this, but I just get super excited about it because it's a new thing that I've been playing around with, and it's a new way to think about the problem solving that AI can do for you.
That sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah, it's cool. I can show you too. All right. Well, that's it for today, everyone. If you like this episode and enjoy some of the discussion about AI, I can encourage you to go listen to any of our other episodes on AI. I promise the conversation will continue there. Comment wherever you're listening on what you think of the story this week. For more in depth discussion, you can join us on our Discord community. Yes, there's stay up to date with all the latest news, all the latest human factors news, visit our official website, all that stuff. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. One, wherever you're at, you can leave us a 5-star review. That helps. Two, you can tell your friends about us. That helps even more because they trust you and you trust us, right? Maybe. I don't know. And three, as I mentioned earlier, you can consider supporting us on Patreon. This show is truly supported by listeners like you. And if you want to help support the show and help us grow, you can do that too. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. I thank Mr. Barry Kirby for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about your pottery spoils?
Well, if you want to find me about pottery, then you're going to go on Instagram because I'm there at mrbpkirby.com. If you want to talk work stuff, then no, I'm now mostly around LinkedIn and Facebook. If you want to hear some of the interviews that we did, we've done up to the end of 2025, then find me at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Rome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Rome. If you're watching live, stay tuned for the post show. Thanks again for tuning into Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
It
it
depends.
depends.